My name's Richard Manser, and the business is 5-Star Windows and Conservatories. We're a sales and marketing operation, really, that supplies and fits windows, doors, conservatories, and the associated products in that marketplace, really.
How would you describe your marketing approach?
It's 75% online and 25% offline.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's quite forward-thinking in terms of, as an example, 10 years ago, literally 10 years ago, we were starting to buy leads off the internet, off companies that were generating a lead. Whereas I think in the last 3 or 4 years, everybody's jumped onto that bandwagon. But 3 or 4 years ago, we started generating our own leads. And to date, we don't buy any leads off the internet. We produce our own leads on the internet. And everybody else is trying to do all the old-fashioned things, and they're scrapping around trying to buy these leads off various lead providers like Quote Artists, Leads for You, Leads to Trade. And so they're all fishing in the same pool, scrapping over each other. These leads get resold, whereas we were doing that 10 years ago when they were a lot cheaper and capitalised on it, spent £20,000 a month just buying leads off the internet. And so we got to know what worked, what didn't work, and we've now started generating leads ourselves. And so I think we're kind of very proactive, forward-thinking on that side of it, and we're doing less and less of the old-fashioned methods.
Okay, and so these leads that you talk about, this is leads for new potential
Yes,
customers
that's
and so
it, yeah.
Okay, and so that's, like you say, just being a bit more proactive rather than the old-fashioned approach of just kind of waiting to see what leads are appearing or buying them from preset databases?
That's right, yeah. I think, the lifeblood of any business is generating new customers or repeat business if you're in that type of consumable marketplace. Mm-hmm. But our customers don't necessarily repeat buy their windows and doors if we do the job properly, although what we found is people who bought conservatories 10 years ago are now upgrading those to the latest types of insulation and things. But the lifeblood is for us to get new leads every week. Mm-hmm. It works out about half the leads we get are existing customers or a recommend or a referral for those from those customers, whereas the other half we have to work really hard to try and get them. Mm-hmm. And so we're doing all the new things like Facebook campaigns, Google pay-per-click, and being quite creative to get them, as well as doing the basics. But what we're not doing is still going around knocking on people's doors or ringing them up when they're having the tea, which is still what a lot of the old-fashioned companies. Yeah. Okay, this week we've got a new Facebook campaign with tiled roof conservatories, bifolding doors, skylights, which is quite a new craze at the moment. People like roof lanterns and skylights, because there's some sort of science in the fact that once you've got natural daylight on you, you feel good. So a lot of people are cutting holes in their living room roof if they've got a flat roof. Yeah. And then putting these roof lanterns in there, so we're promoting those because they're quite topical. Yeah. All these, when I said the old-fashioned methods still work, but what I've come to realise over a number of years is that every marketing method does work to a certain extent, but it's how much it costs to generate a lead, a certain thing like knocking on people's doors. Still works today, and there are nice companies go around that knock on your door nicely if that's possible. But the cost of having a miniature foot canvas team as well as a foot canvas manager and paying a commission to them and doing that sort of thing works. But it only works, and it might cost you say £300 a lead. Yeah. Putting an advert in a local newspaper does work, but it might cost you £180 a lead if you work out how many leads you get for your spend each week. Whereas generating a lead on the internet costs a lot less. In fact, to date, it's costing us £33 to generate a lead, and we're almost selling 1 in 2. So it's costing us £66 per sale, whereas it used to cost us about £300 or £400 per sale. So in business, what you need to do is do more of the things that cost you less money, because obviously the lower you can keep your marketing costs, the more profit you'll make. So
it's really the way you're doing things now is much more efficient than how maybe it would be just relying on those kind of door-to-door methods.
And there's even a big shift at the moment from the latest thing that not everybody has realised just yet, and hopefully they normally take a few years to kind of jump on the bandwagon, is that Google pay-per-click has been a very good source of leads for us. But actually now, if you look at the stats, I can't remember the exact figures, but with Facebook, I think it's something like 50% of all adults go on, or certainly in the UK, go on Facebook, and sort of 80% of those go on for more than an hour a day. So our marketplace, you're actually better off advertising on Facebook than you are on the internet, because most people aren't switching on their computer and searching anymore. They're sat on their tablets, on their smartphones and things, and a lot of them are going onto Facebook as a media source, if you like. So to advertise on there is a lot cheaper than it is to advertise on Google. So where we were spending sort of about £5,000 a month nowadays on Google pay-per-click, we're actually shifting some of the budget of that to say, well, let's spend £4,000 a month on Google pay-per-click and £1,000 a month on Facebook marketing, because we can be a lot more targeted. We can target them by age, by their hobbies, by their social, the whole spectrum really. I don't know if you've looked, but I'm sure you have looked into it, but there's a whole thing you can do to make sure the leads are a lot more specific and they cost less money. And in fact, the campaign we've got at the moment has worked out £6 each.
Okay.
The leads are, which is incredibly low. So
it is, yeah. And so on these social media campaigns, what kind of content do you try and get people to look at? Is it just kind of the latest kind of offers and deals and prices that you have on your products, or what kind of messages do you try and get across?
Obviously the headline is one of the most important things, because you've got literally milliseconds to grab somebody's attention. So to try and capture all the different submodalities of people, if you like, because some people are very visual, some are auditory, some are kinesthetic, some are buy on different ways. You could have nice pictures for the visual people, because a visual person might see a lovely inside shot of a stunning orangery and think, oh, that's what we need one of those. Whereas another person, an auditory person, tends to skim over the pictures and he's looking at the headline that might say, energy saving rooms, usual room all year round. He might think, oh, that's great. So we would have something that said, transform your conservatory into a room you can use all year round. Visit our local showrooms in Kidderminster and Worcestershire, if we're targeting Kidderminster and Worcester or Worcestershire. So we'd be quite specific on what we target. Yeah,
and like I say, blending those different appeals, so the visuals with the actual message as well.
That's right. Yeah, it's getting a good combination of both.
Yeah. Okay.
And the whole key of the Facebook campaign is to get them to go through to our website.
Yeah.
Because we've got quite a good website that's, as of today, is converting at 14.6%. So in other words, for every, say there's 200 people a day go onto our website, there's something like 28, I think it's about 30 leads a day are coming in at the moment off that website, which is a really high conversion, because a lot of websites convert at 1, 2, 3%. So it's no good just sending lots of traffic to a website if the traffic's not meaningful traffic and they're just inquisitive and they go off somewhere else. We're actually trying to find people who are interested in our products by this tagline we'll have on the Facebook campaigns. Get them to a website, and then the website is so compelling that they feel compelled to click in a form and say, oh, send me a free brochure, or I'll visit one of your showrooms, make an appointment for somebody to come out and see me or something.
What do you think have been some of the most effective aspects of your marketing, some of the most effective decisions you've made with regards to marketing? To
move online, I think, to move away from the newspapers.
Yeah.
As hard as it is to be in the glossy magazines, for example, one of the, as an entrepreneur, business owner, you get bombarded with people trying to sell you advertising space, and it's very easy to say yes to things and to not think about the numbers and the mechanics. It's very easy to be proud almost and think, oh yeah, I want to be on the front of Worcestershire Life. Well, I'm going to have this back page of Worcestershire Living, because it's £1,200, but it's a real nice glossy book. But actually, if you looked at the figures, and I can remember from when we were doing, there used to be Worcestershire Life, Worcestershire Living, 24/7 magazine, various different formats. We might get 1 or 2 leads a month that we could attribute to that, because you can't always track every single lead, because some people just walk into your showroom and they don't give you general information. But we record every single conversation. Is one marketing method we use as well. So we check and double check and triple check almost. We ask when the reps fill the form in, they have to put where it came from. But so one of the things I've learned is that if, say, it costs £1,200 to do that, every time now I think, well, actually, how many leads will I get out of that?
Yeah.
I might get 2 or 3, or even if it's a fantastic month, I might get 5 leads. I don't think I would. But if I did get 5, then it cost me £200 and something each. Whereas that same spend I could put into, well, Facebook now is the very latest thing, and probably get 50 leads for the same spend. So although I'd love to be on Worcestershire Life and on every coffee table in all these AB1 homes, actually I'd like to spend that 1,200 quid and be in front of, 20,000, well, I think it's 26,000 people in the last 3 days have seen our advert or something. I'd rather be in front of them subliminally, keeping the word 5-star in them. So it's having that ability to look at the figures and say, actually, it sounds like a good idea, but I'm not going to do that because it just wouldn't get the same bang for my buck or whatever the term is.
So really it's about not making any assumptions about the best methods. You've had to be quite selective and really pay attention to which ones are working, which ones aren't working as well.
I think there's a saying which is, what you don't measure you can't manage, and if you measure things then you actually categorically know what's working. So the KPIs we would use in the marketing department would be what lead sources are producing however many leads in a certain given period of time, what the conversion ratio of those leads are, and what the average order value is. And then that tells us what works and what doesn't work. So we would literally track it, and we would say, well, last given period of time, this Alan has been converting, or we've sold 46.5% of all the leads we went on last year. We could say, well, which lead source produced the best leads?
Yeah.
How many did we sell from that lead source? So then we look at the advertising spend from that lead source, and we know where the best place to put our money is, really.
Has there ever been a time when you felt you didn't pick the right marketing approach to maybe tap into a particular consumer market?
Yeah, there's been loads, which has been great. Again, this is a little bit about this sort of forward-thinking thing and changing the marketing methods and being up to speed with things. Years ago, the Yellow Pages, for example, would have been a really good lead source. The BT phone book would have been a really good lead source. The Thompson directory. And whilst they might still work nowadays, the actual amount you have to spend to get the same that you would get online would be prohibitive. But I do remember doing a £25,000 radio campaign with Wyvern, I think it was at the time. Yeah. And we had a jingle made. It was called Price Your House with a Mouse. I was trying to, nearly 10 years ago now, I had every bit of marketing we did. We had a picture of a silly mouse on there. I had a cartoon chap who drew all this mouse on it to try and stand out, and he did get noticed. And we had this jingle that said priceyourhousewiththemouse.com, blah, blah, blah. And the idea was to try and get people to go online and get a quote for what they would do. It cost £26,000, whatever it was. It didn't actually, although the radio people would say, oh, it works, but it's subconsciously you've probably had more sales. Because we track the sales and we know where all the other stuff comes from, there wasn't this void of money spent. So really, it might have been a little bit of a branding exercise. It may have helped slightly in a few people's decisions, but if you track things consistently, and if you look at, like, for example, this is our goals in the last month, how many people each day have done something on the website, you can see if there's a spike or if something's actually working. So if you look at that over a longer period of time, I could look over the last year or 2 years or 5 years or whatever. If suddenly you start a radio campaign at this point here and things start going up, then we know something is categorically working. Whereas if nothing really changes and the figures are the same and the sales are the same, it's not the best value for your money. So I would say the radio campaign at that time wasn't the best. I also had the back page of Yellow Pages throughout the Worcestershire directory, and we also had to have the biggest advert in the window page and the Conservatory page, and all in all I think we spent 30-odd thousand within Yellow Pages, but the leads they were the most expensive leads. They worked at something like, I don't know, £500 and something each, which is crazy if you think actually what you could put that money into. So I've made some good mistakes. Not mistakes, they're learning curves.
Learning curves,
and it's great to look back and learn these things about.
What types of different market research have you conducted? I mean, you've mentioned a lot about the quantitative data you've captured. Could you tell us more about that? So any of the different methods of research you've conducted?
Yeah, we've spoken to our own customers. We regularly, once a year, we ring our own customers up and we speak to them to just check they don't need any service calls and things. But while we're on the phone, the idea is to engage in a conversation to try and get some data out of them, what the customers are thinking, what they're buying. And from that conversation, that gets shared every week with Ed, our sales manager, and we start to think, we see a trend if people are starting to ask about, for example, tiled roof conservatories at the moment is a thing. People are starting to hear that all in the 90s and early 2000s, there were a massive amount of little 3x3 Victorian conservatories sold with free cane furniture and tiled floors and things. And whilst they seemed really good at the time, consumers suddenly found that they're great, but for about a third of the year, 2/3 of the year maybe. But in the winter, they were too cold, so they became a dumping ground. And in the summer, they were too hot, so they didn't really get used. Whereas now people are starting to ask about this. They've heard that you can have a tiled roof taken off. So when we're ringing people at the moment, we're starting to hear them saying this sort of thing. So we've physically built a tiled roof conservatory in Kidderminster. We've put one in our new showroom in Worcester. So by listening to the consumers, conducting this research, it's telling us what people are looking for. And we see what they spend as well, because we're obviously selling, quite a lot of product. We find out what they're starting to order each week. So we look at our ordering patterns as well and think, well, more people are starting to order grey windows, for example. 3 or 4 years ago, nobody ordered a grey window unless it's, a commercial building or something. Excuse me. Whereas now a lot of domestic customers are starting to see that grey is quite a good choice. So that's by looking at our own data then, and by talking to customers, they're telling us things like this.
Yeah. And so with this, when you're talking to the customers, is it, do you do this research internally, or do you have kind of research consultants?
No, this is an internal thing we do. There are, in our industry, there's something called the Palmer Report, which is a general research, but it's very often geared around, what do, they might survey 1,000 company directors in the UK in the window industry, and they'll ask them what they think. And what I found from experience is it's not always what is actually happening. And a lot of these reports tend to be almost out of date as soon as they're written, because by the time they come out, they're 6 months after they've, it'll be a report from 2015 or 2016. Well, actually, we're already into, 2016, we're halfway through the year, and what they're buying now is slightly different to before. So,
so you have
it's important to find stuff that's up to date, I would say,
Yeah, so you have that, I suppose, the secondary research of these industry-wide reports.
Yeah.
When you're talking to your own customers, do you talk to existing customers or prospective customers?
These are existing customers, because our existing customers, I think on average they move house every 7 years, well, they used to, didn't they? Whereas that's changing now, because people are tending to stay where they were a lot longer and do their houses up. So whilst some people might have had the windows done but haven't had the conservatory yet, some have had a conservatory but they haven't had the windows done, or they need a front door, so there's usually another product they'll buy from us. So when we speak to them, they're telling us about what they're thinking. And we saw the trend with solar panels, for example, coming and going, but when the marketplace is new, it's also an unknown quantity, isn't it? And a lot of people, I think, jumped into the solar market because the consumers suddenly became energy conscious and energy prices were rising through the roof, fuel was going through. But actually, the government took the grants away, or the green scheme that was there. They changed things. The fuel prices didn't actually go up, it's actually coming down again now. So people aren't as conscious of it as they were 12 months ago. So some of the reports that you read on about, this eco trend isn't actually as relevant in there. People aren't asking, or people aren't responding the same way they were 12 months ago, so some of the reports are out of date. Yeah.
And the telephone interviews that you do, I guess they're quite open-ended, so you ask for their comments, or do you ask for kind of ratings of things? Rating scales?
We don't ask for rating scales for it's an open-ended.
Yeah.
We try and make it like a nice conversation rather than, can I ask, have you got 10 minutes to ask you a couple of questions, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so? Because we find people don't like that. We think if you rang somebody up and said, hello, is that Mrs. So-and-so? oh, it's just a quick courtesy call. We like to keep in touch with our customers and engage in a nice conversation.
Yeah.
They're a lot more open and they'll chat to you freely without being under scrutiny.
Yes.
So it's not. It's a scripted one, but a very loose script that we'll try and make sure the details are up to date, make sure we've asked a few questions, but in a very soft, loose way, really.
Generally, what do you see as the critical roles of market research?
To get meaningful data that allows you to steer your business in the right direction. Because I think some people are quite passionate about things that they like, but it's not actually always what the marketplace wants. So I think from what I've seen is some businesses go full steam in one direction and it's not actually what the market's asking for. It's just the chap or lady running the business might be passionate about something, but it's actually not what the market wants. So the idea of market research is to really make sure you're on the right path, what your consumers want, or if you're whichever marketplace you're operating in. The other thing we have is every industry generally has a trade journal, and we have about 10. Literally, there's a Glass and Glazing Times, the Fenestration News, glass this, glass that. There's loads, and they all get sent through. So I very often take them home because you don't have time to read them at work, and this is sort of sitting on the loo reading material, But that's market research as well, and you can you can pick a lot up from that. You can see what people are advertising.
How do you keep an eye on your competitors? And how do you use information and research to track what they're doing?
Obviously, we have a sales force that are going into visit consumers every day, and very often they'll bring back a quote, or if they very often will come back with an order and say they'll bring back somebody else's quote with them. And so every week when our sales manager has his meeting, they'll gather all the information. We have a sort of spreadsheet and we'll say, well, this company looks like they've changed what they're doing because they're no longer pushing this product, they're actually saying they must buy their product from here. So we would say, well, because the idea is that if I was seeing you about a conservatory or windows or something, you may say something like, well, that's great, thanks Rich, but I'm going to get another couple of quotes. And I might use something called a pedestal chop as a sales term, which would be to say something like, well, listen, that's a good thing. My advice would be always to get more quotes. However, from what you were saying earlier, Helen, there might be an argument for using another company than the ones you suggested, because ABC company that you suggested, they're not really going to solve your problems because they only use this. In fact, I think I've got a brochure somewhere in my bag. Here's a quote we picked up the other day, and it says they're offering the so-and-so roof. Now, from what you were saying, you wanted to use this room all year round, but this company, I don't think are using that. My advice would be to go to Fred Blogg's company, because Fred Blogg's, I've got one of their quotes as well, because we often come across each other. I know they do that roof, so it might be good to get a quote from them. The only thing is, they're so expensive. Have you seen the price of their things? But that's up to you. If you want to get another quote, that might be a good thing to do, or whatever. And then consumers think, oh, actually, that's good information. So if the rep is going out there with his market research, he knows what our competitors are selling.
Yes.
He can help the consumer make an informed buying decision. You can say, well, that's great. If you're buying a car, you might say, well, you could go to so-and-so, but you said you're not going to change the car, you're going to keep it for the rest of your life, but the Hyundai brand, or whoever it is, they only offer a 3-year warranty, whereas Kia, or whoever it is you're buying from, they offer a 10-year. Now, that might be something you should consider, but,
Yeah, so it's just as important, really, for the sales reps to know their competitors as well as their own products.
Absolutely,
and to be aware of what they're offering and trying to push.
Yeah, sure,
just as much. Yeah,
the idea of the sales reps, I think in any industry that you're in, is to help people make an informed decision. If you're trying to sell to somebody, you're not really selling you're not trying to talk them into your product as such, unless you've got, you're the wrong sort of company. I think the idea is to help people make an informed decision.
Yes.
And so you have all the information at hand. You say, well, look, this is what we offer. Based on what you would say, you would ask some open-ended questions, what you think you're using your conservatory for example, and you might say, whatever it is. They say, well, listen, from what you're saying, there might be an argument for going for this product that we do.
Yeah.
However, there are other options out there. And if you've got your competitors, you can say, well, there is another company that does this, that and the other.
How have you used research to kind of understand and develop the value proposition that you offer to customers?
I think by listening to what the customers are saying, we can alter things slightly.
Okay.
Because, for example, a few years ago, before these tiled roofs came out, consumers were saying they wanted a room they could use all year round. They weren't saying, we just want this extra living space. They were saying, we want this extra living space, but actually, I'd like to be able to use it more into the winter. So by getting the feedback from the customers, we went and found a product, a polycarbonate at the time, that was 35 millimetres thick and it had 7 layers. And actually had a lower U value, which is just the way you measure heat loss. And it helped the consumers use the conservatories longer. And that was really from listening to what they were saying. So we then changed the product to suit the customer. So we said, rather than just doing 16mm triple polycarbonate, we're now able to offer this as an upgrade, because we found that a lot of people would like to use the thing all year round. So by listening to customers in the first place, it allowed us to use that product.
Has research that you've conducted ever made you reconsider anything or change direction? So something that you found out from research, something that your customers have said, is that challenged any assumptions you've had, made you think about doing something differently?
I'm sure it has. I can't think of anything off the top of my head at this moment, but
yeah.
I think it's really important to listen to what customers are saying and research.
Yeah.
I could give you an example literally of today. It's only a daft thing, but as you know, we're building a new showroom in Worcester, and rather than we've got a conservatory there that's light oak colour on the outside. It's got a little tiled roof. It's for the replacement roof market, and I was trying to think, because I've designed the whole thing myself really, but rather than selfishly sort of saying, I didn't know what colour to have the inside window boards, and I needed to take them over to the chaps who were fitting there today, and I was thinking, well, if I use white, it's completely neutral, And so I said to Leslie, who's the girl who runs the trade counter for me, what would you use? And Nigel was there, the other chap. Nigel was saying, oh, I wouldn't have light oak. Yeah, have white, it goes with everything, which is what I was thinking. And then Leslie said, no, that's boring. Why didn't you go for the thing? So I think by listening to other people as well, and not just going off your own views, because my thought process was then, well, Leslie's a typical consumer. She's probably the sort of person who would buy our conservatory. Actually, that's good to listen to her. So we'll very often put things around the office or speak to customers, to other people, not make the decisions ourselves. So it's good to get feedback. It's quite easy to have your own set of ideas, but unless you do this market research, the idea of market research is to get a broad spectrum, isn't it? It's to go from all the different groups, or certainly for your target markets, you want to try and get the feedback from your target market. I mean, it's, if you're selling stair lifts to elderly people, there's no good speaking to a load of children, is it? It's, you need to speak to the 60 pluses or something. So in our industry, people generally buy from 30 to 65. So we would generally speak to homeowners between the ages of 30 and 65. Very few younger startup people would be buying windows and doors, or certainly not in our sector anyway. So it's important to get a broad spectrum and listen to those people.
And listen to the people that represent the segment you're targeting. And thinking about the targeting, is it been important to you to consider where people are located?
Yes, it's like most businesses, there are the good areas and bad areas of things. One of the things we found from the market research, from speaking to our consumers, was that for a major purchase, which is what a conservatory would be, or a house full of windows, it might be £10,000 upwards very often. People don't want to travel more than 17 minutes, which is interesting. It's not 17 miles, it's actually 17 minutes. So, for example, if they were buying a kitchen, most people would say, I'd like to use somebody locally in Worcester. They wouldn't want to go and use somebody in Nuneaton or Lichfield or the other side of Birmingham, would they? They'd like to shop locally, and buying a conservatory or changing a house full of windows is a similar sort of purchase. And we found by speaking to the customers, they didn't really want to travel more than 17 minutes. So therefore, that told us that the showrooms shouldn't be more than 34 minutes apart.
Yeah.
So we quite easily now cover the sort of Worcestershire region, because that's 17 minutes, you more or less say, well, Malvern will come to Worcester, Pershore and Bromsgrove and Droitwich would come to Worcester, or Kidderminster, or anywhere in. But if somebody lived in Ombersley, which is between Kidderminster and Worcester, they could go either direction now and come to a showroom. But without conducting that market research and speaking to people and asking them these sort of questions, we wouldn't really have known that. So the next showroom we're building is actually in Solihull, because we believe on the M42, if you're somewhere in the middle, in 30 minutes you can actually get round to the Shirley-Solihull network. So from market research like that's told us where to have our showrooms, for example, and then we'll make sure the next one is only half an hour away from Solihull, which will be in Lichfield, and then we intend to have one in Cannock, sort of Stafford area. So then we'll have the sort of showrooms half an hour apart.
Yeah.
So anybody isn't really going to travel more than 17 minutes to their nearest showroom.
How do you make sure that data is reliable and valid, and that you can trust that what's being generated? How do you ensure that it is reliable? Okay,
well, one thing we do is we record every call. We have our own phone system, which we have as a company. It records every single incoming and outgoing call anyway. And then the other thing we do, every marketing lead source on a different system records. We have unique phone numbers, so if you rang, I don't know, if you looked at a certain page on a website, it'll have one phone number. If you looked at another page, it has a different phone number, so we know if somebody's rung from which page on the website. And that goes through a call recording system as well, so it will say calls are being monitored for training and information purposes. And we listen to those calls to make sure that the person speaking to them is saying the right thing. It's obviously is for training as well. So, so this call recording would be the main method of checking that's correct. And then most of the people we have working for us, we do know and trust, and they've worked for us for quite a few years, which is important, I think.
Yeah, and I guess there's always a tendency with consumer research. Consumers may want to tell you what they think you want to hear, and
very much so, yeah.
Yeah, and I just wonder how you feel about that. How do you try and get underneath that?
I think it's a good question. It's also relevant when the salesperson is with a consumer, because very often the salesperson will give them a red herring at the end and say what they want to hear. They'll say, "Oh, that's great, thanks. I really like that. We'll be giving you a call in the next few days." All they're really thinking is, "I'm not making a decision now. Right, I've got the info I need. Go away. Let me think about this," or whatever. So, and consumers would do possibly a similar thing on the phone when we're speaking to them. So that was the idea of the relaxed phone call, rather than ringing them up and saying, "Hello, it's Richard from 5 Star Windows. I'd like to ask you 5 questions, if I may. It'll only take 2 minutes." Right, the first question is, because I think they just get away. Whereas if you can actually get speaking to somebody and have a nice conversation with them, they generally give you a lot more accurate information, really.
So that rapport building is essential for gaining that trust and getting the truth from the consumers.
Yeah. We do go and visit when people have had their products done as well. Very often the person who sold the products in the first place will go back, or Damien, who's our customer services manager, he'll go back and interview the customer. When I say interview them, he'll sit there and get the feedback, how the installation went, anything they might change about 5 Star. We give them lots of questionnaires at the end anyway. There's customer satisfaction surveys and all sorts of things which we get them to fill in, not really for market research, more about how we've performed as a company. But also while we're there, we're asking questions like, is there anything we could have done better? Is there anything you'd recommend we did? And they might say, well, this is really good, that's really good, but actually your communication's not so good. So that's something we're working on at the moment. We've got an app being designed for our consumers, so they can, when they're having their work done, they can actually look at the phone. They don't need to ring us up and say, when you come in to plaster this conservatory, they'll see on the app, oh, the plasterers are coming tomorrow, the electrician's coming the day after, or the tiling's in for next week. And when that's completed, the subcontractor or the tradesperson who's done that bit can actually update the app and say, oh, that's completed now, and you can rate that person how they did. So that's something you'll do.
And in those surveys, the comments that consumers provide, can that be about how you could provide better service or new products? Do they give you comments on both? So do those comments guide you on both kind of service elements and product elements?
Well, we always ask them. We think of it as a jigsaw and say that there's various products that we do, like a porch, your doors, windows, the fascias, soffits and guttering, a conservatory, and we always ask them, is your jigsaw complete? So one of the questions on there might be, have you got windows all done? Are all your doors done? Front door, back door, bifolding door, patio door? Yes, great. Have you got a conservatory? No, not yet. Would you like to think of a porch in your future? Well, maybe. So by analysing that data, we know when we're marketing them in the future. There's no point ringing somebody up about a conservatory if they've just had one.
Yes.
We know not to ring them about conservatory. We know that they may be interested in a porch or a conservatory. So we monitor that. We ask them on several occasions what they think of the various tradespeople, and to register their guarantee they have to go online and fill in a questionnaire which has got 20 questions to register the guarantee, and that gets emailed back to us, so we get to see that. But so does the general public, because it's on our website and it's 5-star reviews, and you can see what people have said, generally.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned earlier that from some of your consumer research, you'd found that consumers don't always want the tiled roofs, and they want them at different times of the year, or that they wanted to remove them and those kind of things. How did you know that? Where did that come from? That's
literally from speaking to the customers. Yeah, from speaking to them, seeing what they're ordering, because there's been a shift away from. Okay, another thing that's just come to mind. I was just thinking about around by our skip where we recycle the waste. We're seeing more and more PVC windows that we're recycling rather than the old wooden windows, because a lot of people are now becoming second-time consumers. So that has given me feedback that some of our marketing people may already have double glazing, but it's 10, 15, 20 years old, and the energy efficiency is probably 3 times what it was before. Literally the U value would have been about 3, now it's about 1. So the heat loss, so it's so much better, they're a lot much more secure. So we know to target people who've already got double glazing that's over 20 years old. They're a really good consumer for us. That's
a good example. And finally, do you share any of your research with other businesses? So, for example, dealers. Is that something that's important?
Yeah, we buy the company that we buy our frames from has other dealers throughout the UK. We're not a franchise; we're an independent business. But it's a little bit like if you're a franchise. I guess they share best practices with each other. So I would imagine if you're whatever franchise you are, you may speak to other franchisees throughout the country, and if you all said what works for you in a different area, because everybody has a different area, nobody's really worried about giving their information to somebody else. And we do exactly the same thing. We speak to, once a quarter we have a meeting to share marketing methods, market research, what people have found in different areas, market trends. So we would say, at the moment there's a new roof coming out which is part tiled and part glass, because we found that consumers like the idea of a tiled roof, but a little Velux window isn't always enough. They'd like a little bit more light, because sometimes by having a tiled roof it makes the lounge dark or something. So one of our suppliers has come up with a product that's, you can literally have as much or as little glass as you like. So that product's been launched this Wednesday actually, and we're having one on a new showroom. So by sharing the information with the other dealers, we've come to all that same conclusion. So the manufacturers now come up with this solution. So that's as a result of sharing best practices, really.
Yeah.